Hello, everyone, and in the spirit of Halloween, everyone's favorite holiday, welcome to AAA Northeast Town Hall, the car buying experience, trick or treat. I'm Mary McGuire, Director of Public and Legislative Affairs at AAA Northeast, and our goal today is to make buying, financing, and insuring a new or used vehicle a treat for you and help you to avoid any tricks of the trade at the same time. For most of us, purchasing a car is the second or third largest investment we'll ever make after buying a home and helping to finance a college education, or 3 college educations in my case. And we want to be sure that we're spending our dollars wisely and buying the best vehicle to serve both our lifestyles and our budgets. By the way, used car sales are up more than 20% during the pandemic. And in September, used car prices spiked 6.7%, the biggest monthly price jump in more than 50 years. So we'll be focusing on used cars today as well as new vehicles. Joining us now to provide us with spectacular advice on making the perfect purchase are 3 AAA Northeast subject experts. John Paul, AAA's car doctor and senior manager of traffic safety, will discuss what you should look for in buying a vehicle. Ted Lyons, Director of Financial Services in the AAA Northeast Bank, will highlight what you need to know to finance a car or truck. And Cody Richardson, lead insurance agent and resident car buff, will provide you with the information you need to know to properly insure your car. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here today, and a big thank you to our audience as well. I'm really looking forward to learning a lot, and I think you will too. And if you have questions, please don't be shy. Type them into the chat box bubble you see on your screen, and if you'd like to share the link to this program with family and friends later and get ready to go car shopping, it is being recorded. So John Paul, our AAA car doctor, let's begin with you and the things we should consider when buying a new or used car. Tell us briefly first about your automotive background and what should we be looking for in a new or used vehicle?
Sure, and thanks, Mary. And this is a great opportunity for people to learn a little bit about the whole car buying experience. Most of us, when we think about car buying, we don't do it that often. Car dealers sell a whole lot more cars than people buy, so they're better at selling than we are at buying. And before I came to work for AAA, I worked as a automotive technician. I've been at AAA for 35 years. A good portion of that, I worked running a business called our AAA Automotive Diagnostic Center, where we would routinely check used cars prior to being purchased. So you really need to think about the car that you're buying, and keep in mind that, and it sounds a little bit corny to say, but buy with your head, not your heart. People fall in love with their cars. They fall in love with the car purchase. Keep in mind, it's just a car, and there's a million more of them out there for you to buy. So if it doesn't look right, if the deal looks too good to be true, if it looks like there could be some problems, pass on that one, move on to something new. That's always the best thing to do. But if you are buying a new car, first off, you want to make sure that it's going to fit your budget, it's going to fit your needs, it's going to fit your wants and desires. Same thing with a used car. Too often people get hung up in the monthly payments, and I'm sure Ted will go into this, but cars are one of the fastest depreciating things you can buy. And the idea of buying a car and taking out, say, a 7-year loan when the car is going to start to need repair after 3 or 4 years, now all of a sudden you need to budget for both the loan payments as well as the repairs. But if you're going to buy a car, and let's talk about used cars for a minute. If you're going to buy a used car, kind of start front to back with the car. You want to look for prior body damage. You want to look for mechanical problems. Is it leaking anything? Oil, transmission fluid, anything that could be an expensive repair coming up. And do all of this investigation. Bring it to a good, reputable repair shop. If you don't have one, go to AAA.com/repair. You can find a list of approved auto repair shops and have them check it over. And do this before you buy the car. That's when you have your negotiation power. After you buy the car and you pay for it, you don't have the same leverage you do before you bought the car. So you want to look for mechanical problems. You want to do a good, thorough road test, and depending, you might want to do that road test at night as well, because cars perform differently during the daytime than they do at night. Lighting might not be, maybe you're over 40 years old. Our eyes change a lot between the time we're 20 and 40. In fact, between the time we're 20 and 60, we need 3 times as much light to see. So if you're somebody who's getting a little bit older, that car that looks great, drives great, but if it doesn't have adequate lighting, it might not be a good car for you. So you have to look at a lot of different things when you're thinking about car shopping, as well as, again, looking at those mechanical problems. Look at those potential issues. Was a car involved in a crash? Was it repaired properly? There's a lot of things to look for when shopping for a used car.
Yeah, so all great advice, John, and great points. Let's talk about mileage on used cars. Used cars are so popular right now. A lot of people don't want to use transit during the pandemic. They're buying a used car. A lot of parents buying used cars for their kids to drive back and forth from college for the same reason. Maybe they don't want to get on a train or a plane right now. So we've seen this surge in used car sales, as you know. So how many miles on a used car generally is too many miles?
Well, it's kind of funny. Cars today have gotten very, very dependable. When I was a kid, the average car at 30,000 miles or so would need a valve job. So the engine would have to come apart and the valves would need to be reground and put back together. At around 80 or 90,000 miles, the engine would need to be overhauled and completely rebuilt. In fact, I remember being a kid at some parking lot, and there was a bunch of older guys hanging around a car with the hood open. And I kind of went, and by older guys, I mean they were probably in their 20s, and I was a teenager. And I went over and I kind of sheepishly said, "What's going on?" And this car had the hood open. They said, "This has 80,000 miles on this car, and the engine's never been apart." Today, we see cars routinely go a couple 100,000 miles. So I wouldn't be at all shy about buying a car with 100 or 150,000 miles on it, knowing that car is going to last a lot longer. I was at the General Motors factory one day where they test engines and transmissions, and they test them to 175,000 miles. So knowing that they're going to be tested to that point, and that's what they're looking at for longevity, buying a car with 150,000 on it, knowing it could potentially go another 100,000 miles. I know, Mary, you have a Honda Pilot with, I don't know, what's it got, 400,000 miles on it?
Not quite, but in the 200s.
Yeah, yeah. So again,
It's still running like a charm.
depending on how you maintain that car and how that car was maintained, that's certainly a possibility. Buying a previous rental car, which people used to be really afraid of years ago, you know, buying from Hertz or Avis or Budget, those can be really good values because they typically run between 10 and 15% less than a typical car you'll see for sale because of the potential, and a lot of times they're as well maintained as a private party car. So that can also be something to look at as well.
That's great advice. Now, speaking of my Honda Pilot, when I bought it, I used the AAA car buying service, and it was tremendously helpful. And by the way, another thing I think to consider that we haven't talked about is size. When I bought my Pilot, it seats 8 people. I had 3 kids, all of whom had friends. I was always driving them to the beach. My next car is going to be a lot smaller and more fuel efficient. So
yeah, it really does. You know, it really does make sense. Again, when you first asked me the question, your wants, needs, and desires of a car. You know, what you want and what you need may be 2 different things. And some people say, well, I really want this, but you don't really need that. And again, somebody might want a big SUV, but do they really need it? And do they really want to pay the extra gas and the extra expenses to fix it? So again, you have to look at it, and you have to look at the convenience of getting it repaired. If you're buying brand new, you want to buy someplace that's close to you, so it becomes easier to get the car serviced. That's another consideration as well.
that's a great point. I bought my car in Natick, and it's definitely not convenient for me to take it to Natick. It's about 45 minutes from where I live. So we've talked with John now about the first steps in buying a car, and now we need to finance it. So Ted Lyons, interest rates are low, and there are some great financing plans available out there that I've seen. What are the options buyers should consider? And I just mentioned the AAA car buying service to John Paul. I know it was a tool that helped me. So is that a good place for people to start?
You're right, Mary. That's a great place for people to start. You know, it helps on a number of different levels. One, you can see what the vehicles are going for. You can look at a variety of things, new cars, used cars. I used it myself, and you know, I purchased a used car, but I was able to see what the other cars were going for. So I know what the value of that particular model and that particular make is, so that when you go to the dealer, you have a lot of information ahead of time. You know, John mentioned earlier, dealers sell more cars in a month than we buy in a lifetime, and they're much better at selling it than we are at buying it. And it's it's really a good thing to know as much as you can before you leave your house and before you get to the dealership. And that starts with researching the car. So there's a lot of tools out there you can do that. The AAA auto buying program is one of them. There's a bunch of them out there. You can run vehicle reports to see on that vehicle, has it ever been in an accident? A lot of the dealers will put Carfax information out there so you can know, and it gets right down to whether or not the car's had an oil change in a lot of cases, but know about the vehicle. And then the financing, that happens to be my world. And I've been with AAA for 23 years and 15 of that has been in the financial services part of it, but know what you're qualified for. So know what, a certain dollar amount's going to cost you in a monthly payment. A lot of dealerships will sell you on just what a monthly payment is. And if you walk in and say, I can afford $250 a month or $350 a month, they'll get you there. But it might be that 7-year loan that John was talking about earlier. So if you do your homework beforehand, and the internet is a great source of information, whether it's on AAA's website or not, we have an awful lot out there as well. So you can get pre-approved for a loan. So you can go out, you don't necessarily need to know the exact year, make, model, mileage, but most people that are car shopping have an idea of 2 or 3. Pick your favorite one, put the application in for that. You'll get information back as far as what your rate's going to be, your term, your payment, and at least that way when you walk on the dealer's lot, you've taken a lot of the variables out of the equation and some information before getting there, because the car buying equation is a pretty emotional one, and people fall in love with that car right when they get on the lot, and it's they get a little emotional about it and they want it, and they'll do whatever they have to do to get that and drive it away, especially if they're going into the transaction needing that car. You talk about the needs and the wants. I have particular what I feel are needs, and my wife will often talk me off that ledge and tell me that that's a want. Maybe I do need a Ford Explorer that can seat 7 people because I got to lug my kids around right now, and maybe the 2-seat sport car isn't the best option. So
exactly.
That as well.
I think that's great advice, and John echoed that you really need to use your head as opposed to your heart. So good point, certainly. So one of the things I have read, Ted, in preparing for this webinar is that when you are pre-approved for a loan and you walk into the dealership, you're in a better negotiating position in terms of interest rate, et cetera. Is that true? And should everyone try to get pre-approved for a loan before they head into the dealership?
Absolutely, because it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to let you know where you stand on the credit front of things. So, you'll know what you're qualified for, not only from dollar amount and whether or not you can get approved, but also what is your rate. A lot of times the dealers will tell you, oh, we can get you into this car at 3.99, 4.99, 5.9, whatever the rate is. That could be better or worse than you could get outside of the dealership showroom, but you would never know if you don't check first. And what may seem like a good deal at the time may not be the best scenario for you. Fortunately, you have options even if that happens. We do a lot of loans that are refinances where, maybe you go to the dealership and you find that Honda Pilot and Natick that you love so much, and you come home and you say, what, maybe I didn't get the best deal. You can go and you can refinance that loan. So most people think of refinancing on the homes, but you can also do it on the car. And with rates being as low as they are today, in a lot of cases, if you go to the dealership, you finance that car and you find out, maybe that wasn't the best deal, we can oftentimes help you out with that as well.
That's such a great point, and I'm so glad you brought it up, and you're absolutely right. Most people think they can only refinance their homes, but you can refinance your car. Is there any kind of a time limit? I mean, you talked about how if you purchase the car and then you find a better deal out there, I mean, do you have to wait 3 days or 5 days or a month?
There really isn't, Mary. The closer to the time that you took out that first loan, the better. Just because as you pay that loan down, there's less savings involved because the time's shorter and the dollar amount's smaller. So as soon as reasonably possible, it's probably, inside of a month or two is the normal time frame we see people do it. But if it could be a year or two down the road. People refinance for different reasons too. It's not only rate, but somebody may have a change of circumstance where they need to have now a lower monthly payment. I have a kid going to college next year, and now apparently I'm going to have to shell out an awful lot of money every month for him to go to college. And maybe that's a reason I want to go and I want to refinance my vehicle, because maybe I want to knock down $100 or $200 off it. And yeah, it will stretch that loan out maybe a little longer, but it'll accomplish the goal for me of reducing the monthly debt, or the monthly payments.
You're absolutely right. People's situations and their financial
Yeah.
situations shift and change for sure, and that affects our choices. So let's bring used cars into the equation here, Ted. How old of a car can I finance, and am I able to get a warranty on that car?
So most lenders, it's usually within 10 years. In a lot of cases, they may even go back further, depending on the position of the borrower. So if they're really good credit and there's value in the vehicle and so forth, it really depends on the scenario as they get real old. But right now we have rates on our rate sheet that go back into, the 2009, 2008 range. So what you find as you get older in the vehicle, the terms get shorter, because the lender doesn't want to necessarily drag out that loan real long, because that car is already older. And not that they're not reliable, and John's already talked about the fact that cars run a whole lot longer than they used to. And I'm in the same boat as you, Mary. I drive cars and they just cry uncle.
All right, Ted.
But in all seriousness, the normal everyday financing we do goes back into the 2008, 2009 frame.
Okay. Well,
and as far as the warranties go, you can get warranties on some cars that are pretty old, but what you'll find is that as you get into those older vehicles, the coverages start to diminish, and the terms you can take those warranties out for also diminish. So you can get them, but you have to be careful what you're buying, because it may not accomplish your end goal. Because as those warranties get placed on older vehicles, one, the price is very expensive, and sometimes it's better to just keep the money in your pocket and use that to pay for a repair if it comes. But the coverages, can be less than you would get on a newer car. So.
All right, Ted, thanks for the great advice and information. So we bought the car with help from John Paul. We financed it with help from Ted, and now we need to insure it in the most reasonable and effective way. And so we turn now to our lead insurance agent, Cody Richardson. So Cody, let's say I'm a first-time car buyer. What do I need to know? Where should I begin shopping for car insurance, and is shopping around payoff?
So the best thing to do, and John and Ted kind of mentioned this as well, is you definitely want to make sure you are budgeting for insurance. Being that it is your first vehicle, you probably never purchased insurance before either. So you want to make sure that you're having that discussion before you even fall in love with a vehicle, so that your monthly amount is accurate based on what you can finance, what you may have to put down, and then the insurance as well. A lot of times consumers will find a vehicle that they kind of fall in love with. They do the credit app, and then they are told, oh, you need insurance, and then they call AAA, or they call another carrier, and they may find out the insurance premiums are a lot higher than what's expected, and it could break a deal, especially if it's too high, or they may require more of a down payment to make their budget fit better. So it's good to go into, if you're shopping around or you're looking at a vehicle online and you're seeing a vehicle that you like, you can do an online quote at AAA.com to see exactly what your actual budget will be for a quote. It's not 100% exact, but it's definitely around the same ballpark of what you would get once we run all the reports, run your driving record. And then at least then you can go into it knowing this is what my insurance will be, this is where I need to start off with, and you can then kind of judge if it's going to fit your needs and what you can afford overall.
So get an idea of the big picture of what the total cost will be to buy the car, finance the car, insure the car ahead of time. So try to get those quotes. So that's great advice. So what are the most expensive cars to insure generally, Cody, and what are the least expensive cars to insure? We're talking about new cars here.
So for new vehicles, you're looking at I would say the brand, Lexus, BMWs, Mercedes-Benz. The vehicles that normally are going to cost you more, that are higher value, are going to be more in insurance. And that's really comes down to the cost they have per parts and labor. A typical mechanic for a Ford dealership may only cost say $150 to $200 per hour in labor costs, but a Mercedes, a BMW, you're looking at $300 to $400 and even above on a mechanic per hour. And then not even talking about parts that goes with that. So the brands itself have a big factor when it comes to insurance, because of course insurance really takes care of when you have a claim. So we're the ones that are going to be getting that vehicle back to the original of what you purchased it for. So if you're buying a high-end vehicle where the expense to do the labor and parts are more, then your insurance expectation is going to be higher. Whereas if you get, a Ford, Toyota, Kias, Hyundais, a lot of those parts are made in bulk and the labor costs are a lot less. So those particular vehicles are usually less expensive when it comes to insurance.
I know what you mean. I had a turbocharged Volvo wagon at one point. It was a terrific car. It took off like a rocket, but it was very expensive to maintain, et cetera. So great advice there. Is there a vehicle or vehicles that are considered to be the safest on the market, Cody? And if so, are those vehicles that are deemed safer cheaper to insure?
Yeah, so they're the models that keep showing up on as far as the safest vehicle reports are like Honda Civic, Hyundais, Kias, Ford Escapes are relatively known for their safety features. The newer vehicles, of course, as they kind of mentioned, is there's a lot more features that are built into the vehicles that are safety related, either additional airbags. They have self-driving vehicles now. They have lane departure warnings or lane correction warnings. So these vehicles are now built in to provide or limit the amount of damage that would happen if you got into an accident to your person or to the vehicle itself. So those vehicles in today, they for the past couple of years have been in the reports for their crash ratings, their safety ratings, and insurance does take that. If there's more safety features to a vehicle, the premiums are going to be less. And if there's more features to prevent an accident, of course, they're going to take that into account as well.
So, Cody, one more question, which is what kind of information and materials do I need to start the insurance process? And then I want to talk a little bit more about safety, because after all, we are AAA, we're all about safety. And I want to bring John Paul and Ted into that conversation about safety as well. But what are the basic things I need to get together to start that insurance process?
So you don't need necessarily much. You need yourself, your name, of course, your personal information, driver's license information. And if you have a vehicle that you're interested in, you don't necessarily need the VIN, but a year, make, and model could be sufficient information to start the process and get you an estimated quote to begin with. It's not going to be 100% exact because we do not have the VIN. And with every model today, there's a base model and a luxury model of vehicle. And there could be a price difference when it comes to the insurance, and that's mostly because of the features that a luxury model has that a base model doesn't. But just your name, your basic information, license, and VIN, and an insurance agent here at AAA, we have our recommendations as far as for coverages, and we usually start off with that. We've been doing this for a very long time, so we know exactly what the industry should be covering, and the limits that are more appropriate with the amount of accidents that are out there. Previously accidents, you can get away with state minimum coverage because the vehicle values and the vehicle damages were so minimum, and the cost of the vehicles to repair was also a lot less. Now the average vehicle's $30,000 to $40,000, and now up above that. So your coverages have to reflect that too. You need to have more coverages to better protect you and better protect that other person that you're involved in the accident with.
So that leads me to my next question. Is it always collision comprehensive? How do you make that decision? On a new car, I assume everybody would want collision insurance, for example.
Yeah, so if it's a new vehicle, probably 9 out of 10 times they're going to be financing the vehicle. And when it's financing, they're going to require full coverage, so collision and comprehensive. If they're leasing a vehicle, they're going to also require full coverage, but leasing vehicles do require higher limits, usually 100,000, 300,000 minimum that a leasing company will allow for insurance. When it comes to used vehicles, it varies. It all depends on if it's valued at a good cost. Usually what I will personally do if someone tells me they're buying a 2005 vehicle is I'll go in and look at a Kelley Blue Book value of that vehicle to see exactly if it's valuable or not. And that's not always the best because we all know that there's 2005 vehicles out there that have actually increased in value based on collections or collectibles, or even movies now have an impact on what vehicles values increase. So we have to kind of use a better judgment. If you're not a car person, you may think a 2005 I don't know, Corvette is valued at whatever its Kelley Blue Book value is, but in reality it's a D06, so it's more valuable because of people want that type of vehicle. So you may need to cover full coverage, collision, and comprehensive on that.
So we have about 5 questions in the queue, which I'm going to put to all of you in just a moment. But I promised we would talk about safety because I do think that in recent years that has become a growing concern among car buyers out there, whether they're buying used or new. So John Paul, you're Senior Manager of Traffic Safety at AAA. I know safety on the roadways is a huge priority for you. And all 3 of you, please weigh in on this. John, Cody mentioned the Ford Escape, for example. Are there other vehicles that you would recommend, and how does the average consumer determine the safety factor when they're going out to shop?
It can vary quite a bit. There's certain cars that historically have good safety ratings. Your Volvo wagon that you had, for instance, was one of those types of vehicles. When people, if their primary concern is safety, go to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration website, safercar.com, go to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, look and see how those cars do. Now, keep in mind, all of the latest safety innovations we're seeing, blind spot monitoring, lane centering, lane departure warning, they're all assistance to you being a driver. They don't replace a fully engaged driver. As much as people want to talk, whether it's Tesla or the new Cadillac Super Cruise, which I guess is in testing with Consumer Reports, has just recently really proven itself to be the best almost self-driving vehicle on the road today. They don't replace a fully engaged driver. They allow you maybe to take your hands off the wheel for a minute or two while you're doing something, but you still have to be paying attention. They're still considered level 2 automation, which means they can control left to right and speed up and down, but they don't replace the driver. So as much as you're buying a car, whether you're buying new or used, try to buy as much technology as you can afford. That's going to help keep you safe. But again, it doesn't relieve you with a responsibility of being a safe driver. Then also look at all-wheel drive. We live in New England, and probably a good portion of our audience is in New England and the Northeast. So we get snow. We may even get snow coming up this weekend. So all-wheel drive gives you a bit of an advantage in slippery weather. It doesn't help you with stopping necessarily, but it'll help keep you going a little bit longer. Still, when it comes to winter weather driving, we always like to remind people that winter tires, good dedicated winter tires, will help make their car safer. And again, law of physics plays out. The bigger the car is, typically the safer it's going to be. So the more mass you put around you, if you're going to be in a smart car versus a Chevy Suburban, is as safe as much safety features as that smart car may have in it, that $9,000 Suburban is going to win. That's just the law of physics involved in that. So especially with parents buying their kids' cars, unfortunately for the kids, you should buy something that isn't any fun. A Ford Mustang is fun. A Chevy Camaro is fun. A two-door Honda Accord Coupe with the V6 engine can be fun. There are fun cars out there. They may not be the safest choice for a novice driver. Keep in mind that it takes about 5 years to become a pretty accomplished driver. So somebody who's 18 years old that's going off to college, putting them in some sort of sporty or performance car is a bad idea. Putting them in a Jeep probably isn't a good idea either, depending on how they're going to drive it, Mr. Lyons.
So I was just going to say, Ted, is it more difficult to finance a hot rod that you're buying for your 17-year-old, for example?
Probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
So,
But looking at those kinds of cars, and I only said that to Ted because I know Ted has a Jeep, which his son, I think, has taken over completely now. So,
yes, he
I've
has.
seen that car because we live in the same town, and I know that the whole
Yeah.
family loves that car. So, Cody, what about insuring, for your younger driver? What advice do you have to save money? I know we've got good student discounts and all sorts of things out there, but what advice to parents do you have?
The biggest advice, especially for kids, is to look at the option on who the vehicle is going to be actually registered to. I know all as parents, once they turn 16, we just want them to be independent and get their own vehicle and get their registration to themselves. But that may not be the best cost effectiveness for the insurance. A new driver, as John mentioned, we consider up to 6 years in some states as an experienced operator. Well, within that 6-year time frame, the premiums are going to be a lot higher. So it's usually best to have an adult that is experienced to have the vehicle registered or co-registered to them so that they can also enjoy the benefits of that experienced driver, but also the additional discounts that the parent may have. They may have a homeowner's discount. They may have a longevity discount with the insurance company they have. They may just have a list of discounts that now the child is going to benefit off of. Whereas if the child is getting their vehicle the first time and it's registered solely to them, they're going to have to start over kind of from scratch. Now they can of course purchase a renter's insurance if they're renting somewhere, or good student if they have a B average or above in school. Those will help soften the blow of the insurance, but it's still going to be more expensive than to put that vehicle on an existing policy under, say, an existing experienced driver.
So, Ted, I want to ask you about tire and wheel coverage, because this was something I've worked at AAA for 12 years that I didn't know about until I did an interview with our colleague Sean McGee, who told me about tire and wheel coverage. And I think this is something a lot of people can benefit from. Can you tell us what it is and how it works?
It is, absolutely. And this speaks to the safety end of things too, but we offer this coverage. It's tire and wheel coverage. So you can go out and you can purchase this coverage on your vehicle, and we'll cover you for road hazards on the tires. It will cover you for damage to your rims, whether it's a dent to a rim, or even road rash, where you go up to park right next to the curb and you scrape your wheel along the side of the curb, and it'll take
I hate that.
damage as well. They also cover key fobs if you lose your key fob, and if the car is within 5 years or newer, it'll cover you for some dent and ding, where as long as it's not on a curved part of the car or too big of a dent, it'll cover some paintless dent removal as well. So how many of us have gone to a parking lot where it was on a windy day and you see the carriages come across, and it happened to me where it dinged my door. It would cover something like that. These are all things to consider when you're buying the car, and especially if it's a new driver, the likelihood that something's going to happen to those wheels or those tires, or a dent or ding is an absolute possibility. The extended warranty is another thing too, where if you're buying a car and you put an extended warranty on it, maybe you're not going to do a repair to something that you should because you don't have coverage on it. Where if you have this extended warranty in place, you're probably going to fix a lot of those little things that you'd maybe put off till later, keeping the car a little safer on the road, especially if it's a younger driver driving around, where you want them to have something as safe as they could possibly have.
And it's pretty reasonable, as I understand, by the way, the coverage.
Yep, for most cars, it's under $600 for your average car, and as Cody talked about earlier, the more expensive cars, the coverage is going to be more expensive as well. But keep in mind those repairs are also expensive, so it averages out.
Sounds like it's well worth it to me, for sure.
Absolutely.
I could have some dings.
Yeah.
So we have a whole list of questions here, and I want all three of you to weigh in, as appropriate. And the first question is for John Paul, but again, Cody and Ted, if you have thoughts you want to add, please do so. So the question is, should I consider a hybrid vehicle? Are they reliable, and do I need to pay a premium for them?
Hybrid vehicles pretty much are as reliable or more reliable right now than most of the cars that we see for sale. depending on how old it is. Once the car gets to be about 10 years old, then battery issues can start to pop up. A hybrid vehicle is a car that's powered by an internal combustion engine and an electric motor that's powered by some sort of traction battery. There are a variety of hybrid vehicles. There are hybrid vehicles and there are plug-in hybrid vehicles. A plug-in hybrid vehicle has a much bigger battery and the car can run on pure electric power for a limited period of time. Something like the Prius Prime, again, a very dependable car. And these are cars that car makers don't make a lot of money on because they have so much technology in them and they're trying to get their name out for this reason. But a Prius Prime, I think, can drive about 40 miles on pure electric power. The Hyundai Ioniq, which is similar size to the Prime. It's a hatchback. It's a plug-in. They have a plug-in version, a plain gas version, and a fully electric version. Those cars have been extraordinarily dependable. So if you're trying to be a little bit greener, whether it's saving green or just being a little bit greener for the planet, your emissions levels are going to be lower, dependability is a little bit higher. And if you're concerned about driving a hybrid in the wintertime here in the Northeast, the Prius now has an all-wheel drive option, so it will be able to get you out of the snow in poor weather conditions. Again, good winter tires can make a big difference. But as far as dependability, I probably wouldn't look at a 9-year-old hybrid knowing that the typical life of a hybrid battery is somewhere between 10 and 12 years, because that battery, although they've come down in price quite a bit, from $6,000 or $7,000 down to a couple $1,000s, that could be a repair that's in your future. I was on a radio program yesterday, and one of the callers called in and said they have a first generation Prius and they rebuilt the battery themselves. They actually called the company up, they took the battery out, they sent it out, they brought it back, and they said they were able to do it just for a few $100s. So depending on kind of your do-it-yourself level, that's always an option. But as far as dependability, the cars are extraordinarily dependable. And again, I think it's because they over-engineer them because they want that high quality hybrid to be out there. Now, as hybrids can vary from something as simple as a Hyundai Prius to something as complicated as a Porsche 918. So you can buy a used Prius for $6,000 or $7,000, or you can buy $1 million Porsche. So it really depends on your budget. And again, look and see what you want. And if you're looking at a plug-in, keep in mind you can charge from home in a convenience charger with 110 volts. Easy if it's done in the garage rather than out in the driveway in the winter, but you can still do it.
You can buy $1 million Porsche, John. I can't, but I can dream. Hey, Ted, I have a question for you from one of our viewers who is curious about those large dealer prep fees or document fees that dealers tack on to the price of a car. Can those be negotiated, Ted?
So some can, some can't. The doc prep fees are usually pretty well set in stone from the dealerships. I just bought a car this past summer and tried to get out of one, and they said absolutely not. That's what we charge. It's actually pre-printed on their forms. There are other fees that they may want to throw in there that you can get around, but I've not seen where you can get out of a doc prep fee. They may give you a concession on something else, but those fees typically stay in there.
It seems to me, though, that based on my experience in the past, Ted, that you have nothing to lose if you ask or if you try to negotiate. You should always go out there and try, correct?
I am a firm believer of that, absolutely. And my wife laughs at me all the time, and I use my AAA card everywhere I go, and the and save discount. She kind of always looks at me, and I'm like, you're not going to get it if you don't ask.
That's right.
Places may offer it, but if you don't ask 90% of the time, you're not going to, they're not going to do it. So there's no harm in asking, especially when you're at that point of the negotiation. For sure.
I think that's great advice for consumers in general when they're buying anything, any product, to really ask a lot of questions and to try to negotiate. So Cody, another question from a viewer, which is, in general, what is the best way to save money when you're insuring a car?
The best way is to, when you're asking, ask what discounts you apply for. Sometimes consumers don't ask, do I apply for, or do I qualify for other discounts? Or asking, is there any way to lower the premiums? I mean, some insurance agents out there will will lower the coverage as low as possible and try to increase your deductibles as high as possible, but you don't necessarily want to do that to save money. The deductible is the amount that you would pay if you were in an accident at fault. So you do not want a, say, a $2,500 deductible, because that's the amount that you'd be paying out of pocket. And that's a lot of money. So you want to make sure your deductible is at a reasonable, comfortable level. I usually say, if you had an accident today, do you have $500 in your bank account to pay? Because an accident doesn't wait until you're ready. It happens when you're unprepared for it. But asking for what discounts, what additional, policies you may qualify for, a good agent will definitely offer any type of product that we offer to try to lower down the price for you, to add on any discounts. But discounts is the biggest factor. You gotta either speak to the insurance agent and ask what you can qualify for, see what, there may be a defensive driving course you can take, a driver training, safety course. Those are very overlooked, and I know AAA offers product like that. Doing something like that to save it, and that's usually for 3 years that certificate will be acceptable. That can definitely save you some money on your premium as well.
So this same viewer would like to know if a reasonable collision deductible, we were just talking about deductibles, for a new car is $1,500 a reasonable collision deductible on a new car?
I would say the average deductible in today's market is a $500 to $1,000 deductible. You can definitely look at a $1,500 deductible, but I would ask to see the price difference between a $1,500 and a $1,000. Normally, the price difference between those two deductibles, minus being $500 more, is going to be a very small price in premium. So the way I usually break it down is if you're at a $1,500 deductible and you see a $1,000 deductible, if the price that you're saving is less than $500 yearly, it's, in my mind, not worth it. You're coming up with $500 extra at a time of an accident, but you're only going to save, say, $50 extra a year to do that. You want to make sure it's worth that extra savings to go with a higher deductible. So I would say starting out at a $1,000 and looking at to see if there's any benefit for going higher.
Okay,
Mary,
so that's a good benchmark for us. Go ahead, Ted.
One thing to add on to that too is that if they're financing that vehicle, and Cody alluded to this earlier today, if they're financing it, a lot of lenders will cap what they'll allow for deductibles. So in our cases today, most of our lenders have it capped at $1,000. So they wouldn't necessarily be able to finance with a lender in our case if they were looking to have a $1,500 deductible.
Okay, so good point. I'm glad you added that, Ted. Cody also brought up something really important, and that's the AAA Defensive Driving Program, the Driver Improvement Program. So, John, I know that you're an instructor and have taught this program for a long time. Can you talk about the program, what it is, and how people can use the program to save money on insurance?
Depending on where you live in Rhode Island and Connecticut, it's designed for drivers over the age of 55 in Rhode Island, over the age of 60 in Connecticut. Massachusetts doesn't offer a discount. When you turn 65, your insurance rates kind of go down automatically. They don't tell you as you get older, they go back up as well. But in New York and New Jersey, taking our program, it doesn't really make any difference as far as what your age is. It can help you with some insurance costs as well. Right now, we're doing the majority, because of the pandemic, we're doing the majority of our courses online only. So if you go to AAA.com, if you're watching right now, if you go to our website, you'll see the different defensive driving classes that are offered in a variety of different states. Hopefully at some point in the near future, we'll go back to offering them in person, but that's one way you can save. My only little bit of advice that I have is buy the most insurance you can afford, only because I got a letter from our insurance company. My wife was involved in a collision. It was the first thing she's ever been involved with in all her years of driving, never even received a parking ticket. And we had what I thought was sufficient coverage. And we got a letter from our insurance company that said, this might settle outside of your limits. That is not a letter you want to get. So my suggestion is, look at the insurance costs, because going from 50 to 100,000, from 50 to 100 to say 300 to 500 isn't that much more expensive, and it's a lot more information about it's a lot more coverage for not a lot of money. And again, if you want to find out more information about the AAA defensive driving class, AAA.com/defensive driving, and you can find out where those classes are located. And again, right now the majority of them are all online. We are doing a couple of the we're trying a virtual class where the instructor is actually kind of live to their audience, but people are still doing it at home. We tested out one of those, and we may do those in the future as well. But the pandemic has changed quite a bit of that for us, but hope that helps.
For sure. But these are very popular classes, by the way, so absolutely reach out to us and we'll be happy to get you set up in a class. So Cody, John brought up the difference in the insurance policies regarding defensive driving course in different states. That fits in with another question from one of our viewers, which is why are auto insurance rates different between states?
Well, the insurance differs between each state, and it's mostly based on as far as the state regulations. So some states have a tighter grip on as far as the premiums that are associated. So for instance, Massachusetts, their rates are very highly regulated than say Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. But it also goes down to the amount of claims in certain states. So not to bash Rhode Island, but Rhode Island itself, there was some mass amount of claims that we've had as far as in the state total, which then did increase the amount of premiums that insurance carriers had to charge. Also, up until I believe a couple of years ago, they were not regulating as far as or capturing the people that didn't have insurance. I believe there was a statistic up until 2 or 3 years ago where Rhode Island was one of the highest uninsured states out of in the country, which we're getting a lot better with the state DMV requiring insurance outside of getting a vehicle registered or inspection. Now they are sending out letters after, I believe, 30 to 45 days requiring that the insurance companies actually provide notice that that person does have adequate insurance. But each state it really goes by the amount of accidents and claims in each state that is as far as put in. The company will definitely increase the premiums over what is normal than what the state requires.
So I have another question here from Debbie N. So thank you, Debbie N, for your question. And I want to put this question to all three of you. I know that John Paul's the car doctor, but let's get some input from all three of you on this. What is a good, safe car? And I know we've touched on this already, but perhaps you can all offer a couple of recommendations or things to look for. And how do you research safety most effectively? You talked about NHTSA, John, already, but what recommendations for Debbie N?
Well, I would still kind of go with the same recommendations. If you're looking new or used, look at the crash test results, look at dependability, because for instance, a Saab is a pretty safe car. Is it dependable? No, not at all. So it's not a car that's it's going to be a car that probably breaks down more often than others. So you want to kind of look at a variety of different things. And there is so much information online, it's almost overwhelming sometimes. But if you are looking, keep in mind that sort of mid-size all-wheel drive sedan might be extraordinarily safe. Even a front-wheel drive mid-size car like a Ford Taurus. We have a coworker who I think was on his 5th Ford Taurus at some point, and had good dependability and good safety record with the vehicle. So something like that can be a good safe car. Something like a Subaru Outback that has all-wheel drive, 8.5 inches of ground clearance, gets good fuel economy, has a good safety rating, has good reliability rating, and also easy to get in and out of, not like an SUV where you have to jump up into it. Something like that could be a good choice for somebody. So there's a lot of cars out there. There's no real bad car out there today. There are some that are better designed than others. I always sort of make fun of the high-end cars like Jaguar and Land Rover. Beautiful cars, comfortable cars, horrible infotainment systems. They're so distracting to use. So it limits that. The other important thing is when you're road testing a car, you're not just road testing the car, you're road testing the tech. you have to make sure the technology is going to match what you want. And that comes down to everything from syncing up your phone to the music you listen to the ability to use the technology in the car. If the technology is not simple to use, it's not going to work for you. And keep in mind that, you know, the dealer may say to you, oh, this has a voice system. You just have to tell it what to do. Well, we know from our studies that we've done that when you tell a voice command something, your brain sort of shuts down for up to 26 seconds, waiting for that command to happen. In 26 seconds at 60 miles an hour, you've traveled an incredible amount of distance. In 1 second of not paying attention, you've covered almost 90 feet. So think what happens when your brain shuts off for that long a period of time. So road test the technology, road test the car, and make sure it's going to fit your needs and what you want from a car. The worst thing is, and we'll go back a few years where the Toyota Camry was absolutely the most popular car on the road. And people would say, just buy a Camry, it'll be a good car. Not if it doesn't fit you, not if it's not comfortable for you, not if the headlights don't work for you, not if the steering position's not good for you. So you need to, a good solid road test is important. Most cars today are safe. Some are safer than others. You know, do the research ahead of time to find out what works best for you.
And, you know, I think another important point, talk to the person who's selling you the car, talk to the dealer, and find out what the safety features are and those additional features are and how they work. You know, we found through our AAA research that so many people drive off the showroom floor or out of the showroom and they don't even know what the bells and whistles are.
My only caveat with that is the dealer is going to say it's the best car made while they're working at that dealership. Then they move over to the Toyota dealership and it's the best car made while they're working at that dealership. So kind of take that with a little bit of grain of salt. And also one of the studies, and Mary, you alluded to one of our studies, is that how the nomenclature is presented, you know, something like the Tesla autopilot system makes it sound like it's going to drive itself. Well, it doesn't. And there's crashes that certainly show it doesn't. So
right.
Again, do your research ahead of time. And honestly, car dealers, whether it's new or used, like a well-informed customer. They like somebody who comes in, they know what they're looking for, they know what they want, and they have an idea how much it's going to cost. And like Ted said, if you go in there with the idea of, you know, your credit rating, you know what you're capable of financing, the dealers like that because they know that you're going to be able to come in and they can move on to the next customer. You know, they can get through you and move on to the next one, and that's how they make their money.
And obviously being well informed applies to financing and insurance as well. Ted, you look like you have something you want to say, so go ahead and say it, and I have a question for you.
Just to add on to what John was saying, so you've gone and you've done all this research and you found, you know, what are dependable cars and safer cars and so forth. What you can do, the internet's such a wonderful thing now, and you know, you can go out there and see what other people have said about these cars and how reliable they are. But the auto buying tools that are out there now too. So you could go to an auto buying site, whether it's ours or someone else's, and you can put in a price range. So you've already gone out and you've found out I can afford X amount of dollars a month, which translates into however many thousands of dollars this car is. You know, these auto buying programs are so configurable now. You can get down to price range. So, you know, I want to find a car that's between $15,000 and $20,000 because I know that's going to be $300 to $400 on a 5-year payment or 5-year loan term. And you know, you can whittle it down, and then you can go look for those cars that you just researched and found were dependable and safe. And then you can even drill down as far as once you get into it. You can, on the new car side, you can actually configure, you know, the vehicle you're looking for, and it'll pull up real dealer inventory. On the used side, you can weed out. If you don't like white cars, you can weed out. You know, you can weed out white cars. I know somebody that's on their 6th white car because they can't get over themselves on that color. They love that color. And you know, they could get every other car out of there and look for just white cars. So exactly. So you know, there's so much information at your disposal out there, and you know, do it before you go visit the dealership. Absolutely.
There's someone calling looking to buy a car now, Ted. So by the way, I use the car buying tool myself, the AAA tool, and it saved me so much time. because that's what I plugged in. I plugged in the make and model I wanted, the color, the price range, all of those things, and it pointed me to 3 dealerships. And I went out, and I think the second dealership I visited, there was the car that I ended up buying. So it was such a great time saver for sure. So Ted, a follow-up question for you from Trish, one of our viewers. She says, I have excellent credit and the dealer offered me a pretty high rate. Why are AAA interest rates so much lower?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, we work with credit unions and they typically have a lower rate structure. And then a lot of times the dealer will mark up those rates. So, you could get a lower rate, but they may be offering you a higher one. It varies by dealership, but in a lot of cases, they may not give you the best rate right off the bat. And we talked about it earlier. You don't get if you don't ask. So, you can always say, can you do better? Or if you get there and you know that you have a 2.99 interest rate or lower from AAA and they're giving you a 3.99 or 4.99, ask why. And, maybe you want to question whether or not you want to finance them with them or do business with them if they don't give you the best deal right out of the gate. So, that's one of the benefits of working with, a third party outside of the dealership, someone like AAA or your local credit union, et cetera, because we're giving you our best deal up front. That we're not really playing any games with anything. So,
Ted, one more question for you, and then I want to do a quick round robin. I want to ask all of you what your favorite car that you've owned has been. So I'll give you a minute to think about that. And Ted, one final question from a viewer. My wife and I bought a car recently and financed it at 3.99% from the dealer. Would that be a rate I should think about refinancing? We talked about that earlier. It's a Hyundai Sonata, and our loan was for $22,000.
I didn't catch if you said what model year that was or what term they took it out for, because it's a hard question to answer without those. But,
yeah, I don't have either of those pieces of information.
I would recommend they give us a call. The number's right up there on the screen. We do have our rates posted online as well, so they could go out there and see what our rates are for that particular model year and what term they financed for. And geography also plays into it as well, because rates in Massachusetts and Rhode Island may differ from rates in New Jersey and New York. So, and much like Cody said earlier, those rates vary depending on the lender's particular scenario. So they may have a higher loss rate in a particular area depending on, or a higher default rate in a particular area. So they may have to charge up for that in their rates. So it really will depend on where that person is. And maybe a very good rate for their area. It's hard to answer that question without all the variables, but I would say absolutely call us, reach out. We can go over that particular scenario in detail, and we tell an awful lot of people not to move too. If they call us up and they have a better deal, or it doesn't make sense to do it, we will oftentimes recommend not to do it. We're really looking out for the best interests of our borrower and our member.
So the good news is you see the number where you can reach that on your screen. We also have a number for John Paul, who takes a lot of questions from car buyers and people with questions about traffic safety. I remember taking a call for John in the office one day. This woman said, I need to talk to the car doctor within the next 45 minutes. We're on our way to the dealership. So feel free to call. Same with Cody. You see the number for Cody and the insurance folks right there on your screen. So, I have to apologize because we have a hard stop at 1 o'clock, but we have more questions that I wasn't able to get to. So John, Ted, and Cody, much of what you've said, so much of what you've expressed here today has really resonated with our audience, because again, this is a major purchase for so many. So Cody, let me go first to you. I know that you're a car buff. You said you've had a lot of Mustangs. We talked about that yesterday. What's your favorite car that you've ever owned, and what would you love to own in your dream shop?
So my favorite car that I've owned, and also the most expensive that I've put money into, is a 2004 Mustang Cobra Terminator. It was, yes, I was impulse buy, and it was not the best purchased. It wasn't reliable at all, but most supercharged vehicles are not. And probably the vehicle that I would love to own would be a Ford GT. Just growing up on that was the sports car that beat Ferrari. So it was something that I always wanted to own. Probably will never be able to afford, but that's my dream.
Ted, what about you? I know you love the Jeep you have now.
I do, and prior to that, I would have said that one of the first cars I ever owned was a 1966 Chevelle, which I wish to this day I still had in the garage, but I don't. But that Jeep has been an awful lot of fun. I'm keeping John Paul employed with the amount of phone calls I have, asking how to fix this and modify that. So it's an awful lot of fun. I really do like it. Unfortunately, I don't get to drive it so much because my son has claimed it. But
Yeah, that tends to happen, doesn't it, when you have kids?
it does.
And our AAA car doctor, what's your favorite car that you've owned? I can't believe I've never asked you this question.
The favorite car that I owned was probably one of the earliest cars I ever owned, and it was a 69 MGB, so a little two-seater convertible. It was the most fun I ever had with a car. It broke down the most often of any car I ever owned. It was a horrible car, but when it ran good, it ran great. It was fast, it handled well, it sounded good, it was just fun to drive. It was a great convertible, but it was just a horrible, absolutely horrible car. And if we're talking about cars that are sort of unobtainable and fun to drive, I did have the opportunity to drive a McLaren for about 4 or 5 days, and there's not much that turns more heads than that. But honestly, if I was going to go buy something today, it would be the new C8 Corvette. I don't think there's a better value out there in a near supercar than the new C8 Corvette. It's fast, it's beautiful, it handles great, and you can buy one with options, nicely optioned for 70 grand, which way more than I'll ever spend on a car. But certainly if somebody's looking for a car that's going to be fast and turn heads, the new C8 Corvette is about as good as it gets.
I think we've got a whole nother webinar here on favorite cars. And I have to say my favorite was my 5-speed Volkswagen Rabbit. And I learned to drive on a stick shift Saab, and I still miss driving a stick shift. I still don't feel like I'm really driving. So, hey, you guys have been so great. It's been such a wonderful conversation. I apologize to our audience that we didn't get to all the questions, but you have those phone numbers, AAA.com insurance, AAA.com financial services. The car doctor, you know where to reach him. So feel free to reach out after this presentation and ask your questions. And I know they'll be happy to chat with you. So that's going to do it for us today. I hope our audience learned as much as I have. A big thank you to our expert panel and our viewers, and a shout out to our behind the scenes engineers, Mark Shieldrop and Alex Schlatke, for their great work and great slides as always. Visit us at AAA.com for more information. Log on to the Car Doctor radio show on North Shore 1049 or 104.9 FM, and feel free to email any of our panelists at the addresses you see on your screen. So thanks for being with us. Have a great day and buckle up. So important. Drive safely, happy, and healthy. And when you go to buy a car, it's wishing you only treats and no tricks. Happy Halloween, everyone. For AAA Northeast Public Affairs, I'm Mary McGuire.